Hey friends, welcome to the Empowered Homes Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to grow strong families by connecting church and home. Another great episode that you're watching today. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and go and leave us some reviews. We want to just hear from you. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about extending the conversation. What do we do with the kids who they don't want to talk? We all have those kids that after school, you're like, hey, how was school? Fine. And that's it. So I got Joe Landi with me. Joe Landi, welcome, brother.
How's it going, brother?
Good, man.
Good conversation to have here.
Yeah, we're just going to spend some time talking about, how do we extend a conversation with our kids?
Super important.
So, yeah, why is conversation important at home?
One of the things I'm constantly thinking about is just how we're constantly trying to cultivate in our kids' relationship with them and cultivate an environment for them to grow in a godly way. And honestly, communication is huge.
Yeah.
And so if you have no conversation, you can't do those two things. You can't cultivate relationship with them. You can't cultivate an environment for them to be that's conducive. So as parents, communication is huge. And for those of us that are married, we know that. So it should be a no-brainer.
Absolutely.
But it's difficult.
It is hard. It's hard. There's times with conversation, we've said this phrase even here on the podcast of like, with our conversations and communication, are we correcting or are we connecting?
Right.
Evaluate. Are you correct? Is the only time you talk to your kids is to correct them, or are you leveraging conversation for connection?
Right.
And so our hope as parents, we all would hope that we would spend more time connecting.
Absolutely.
And so, but I know you work with teenagers and you hear from teenagers all the time.
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but they're saying, I don't feel like I can talk to my parents.
Right. Exactly. They don't understand. They're not going to listen. They just want to tell me what to do. So clearly what I hear when I'm hearing students say that is, I don't have a relationship with my dad or my mom, or they don't want to listen, or they don't want to have a conversation with me. So I'm excited about what we're going to talk about here, because these are some good questions.
And there's fear that comes up with those kids who, maybe shame or guilt has been present before.
Right.
And so there's a cool rule that you have, the 10-second principle. We can talk more about that, but we have a ton of resources on Empowered Homes with the 10-second principle. If you don't know what that is, we'll link it in the description, but you got to know the 10-second principle.
Sure.
So for time today, I want us to, we got 7 questions. So if you're having a conversation with your kid, they come home from school, they're talking about sports or whatever, and then you just feel like they're shut off. They're like, I'm done talking. As parents, we have a choice. Do we just move on? We're done talking. Or do we strive to continue the conversation to dig a little bit deeper?
Right.
And so I've got 7 questions that as parents we can add to our toolbox just to have in our mind to say, hey, if I want to use conversation to connect more, here's 7 questions that we can leverage to extend the conversation past whatever our kids are going. Because I think for me, and we'll talk about this here in a second, for me, when we extend the conversation, that's when the little nuggets come out with the kids. That's when those real things come out that are beyond the surface. And so we want to give you 7 questions. So the first question, and we'll have all this in the podcast description and on YouTube. The first question, if you're in the conversation with your kids and maybe it's an emotional day, they have stuff going on, or maybe it's something you feel like, okay, there's something going on with you, and you just told me this thing that happened at school. And so here's an easy question. Man, how did that make you feel? And so we're going towards feelings because everybody is free to have feelings. Feelings mean something. And so instead of us just ignoring those feelings, we get to pull those out and let them know. So how did that make you feel, Joe? What do you think about that question?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think sometimes we think that's like a therapist question. We have these idea of like laying on a bed and tell me how that makes you feel. But honestly, it's a good question because we're created beings. We're created emotional beings as part of our personality. As emotion is a lot of, how we do life and relate to things. And the thing I like about a lot of questions you have here, Bobby, is they're questions that are open-ended.
Yeah.
Meaning, I'm not just going to get a yes or a no. Like you mentioned earlier, I think you said, how was school today? Good. You know, just one question. How does that make you feel, or how did that make you feel? Is a question that it elicits more of a response than, well, bad.
Yeah.
You know, because it's an easy follow-up. Well, okay, so it made you feel bad. Tell me more, you know, and we'll get to that a little bit. But I like the open-endedness of it, and I like it. I like these questions too, especially this one, because it allows your kid to know that, hey, I'm not assuming anything. I know how I would feel in that situation. I would be angry, upset, whatever that is. But I want to know how you feel, because you're your own person.
Yeah.
And what you think matters. And so I think it adds a lot more than just, hey, just tell me the answer. You know, tell me what you're really thinking. So
and you know, going any situation, but I'm just one that's coming recently is, you know, we just lost a loved one in our family, and this question was one. You know, my oldest son, he kind of internalized a lot of stuff that was going on. It was his great grandpa, and there was a moment where I was talking to him, and it just kind of, he shut off, and he said something about just fairness and life, and I just asked this question, like, how does that make you feel? Are you mad? And I gave him freedom to feel that, and he said, Dad, I kind of am mad. I'm upset. He didn't suppress that. He wasn't like, because I remember growing up, like, you can't be sad, you can't show emotions. There was just this kind of stigma, and so for him, I gave him freedom to let him know, like, buddy, it's okay to be really, really sad right now. We just lost our great grandpa, and so,
and then teaches them how to process emotionally those things, and like, hey, talking about that is a good thing. When our kids are holding things in, and they don't allow their emotions to come out, they come out in very, very unhealthy ways, and so it's a great question.
My daughter comes home and says, "Hey, this girl in my class made fun of me for my freckles." And I think they're so cute. I can't say that to them. Those are the cutest freckles in the world. So how did that make you feel? And it just opened up this avenue of insecurities that I had no idea were there. And so it's a great question. Number 2. All right, so number 1, how did that make you feel? Number 2, this one is more on, you know, you're in the middle of a conversation and there's some confusion maybe. Like your kids are trying to figure out the world or figure out a situation or problem, trying to find solutions. Question number 2 is, why do you think that is? So why do you think that is? And just instead of telling them, well, you know, Jimmy Bob, your friend, is an idiot for doing whatever, like, instead, like, why do you think that is? Whatever the situation is, or tell me more of that. Is it kind of follow along with that? What do you think of that question?
Yeah, I just think, again, it invites more conversation, right? Why do you think that is? Well, I think number 1, it tells your son or daughter, like, hey, I care what you think. I want to know what you think. You're smart. You're intelligent. You know how to think through things. Tell me what you think. What do you know? And it's not a thing to go, why do you think that is? And then they tell you, and then you go, okay, well, here's what it really is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't follow up with that. But I would say, hey, why do you think that is? You know, just to see what they're thinking, just to see what they know. And it's a non-assuming question. I don't assume. You know, and then they may surprise you, like they know more than you think they knew, or whatnot. So, again, I like that it continues conversation.
Yeah, it's just, again, extending the conversation, and it lets them have a voice. You know, it's as they get older too. I'm learning with my kids that they have a voice, they have an opinion, and they want to plead their case, if you will. And so, why do you think that the world is doing this or that? It's an easy one.
It's a good one when they've got friends or classmates that they see respond a certain way, and they come home and tell you, like, hey, my friend did this through this, or said this thing to someone else, and it was really, really hurtful. And you ask the question, hey, why do you think that is? And you get their wheels turning. And there's been a couple times where my son has said, well, I don't know, maybe he's not treated well in other places or home. And it allows you to have a good conversation to say, you're right, buddy. And that's why it is important for us to treat people well, because honestly, that's how sometimes people, you know, you get to have those deeper conversations and allow them to kind of, you know, empathize and whatnot. So,
and I heard recently the antidote of not raising selfish kids, or like against raising selfish kids, is giving them a picture of the other side of the story of you know, if your kids are always late, they're like, that's not a big deal. 10 minutes late. Well, let me give the other side of the person who's waiting on you. You just wasted 10 minutes of their life. And so the antidote of us not raising selfish kids is helping them understand what's really going on, big picture. So giving them that question, why do you think it is big. Number 3. Number 3 and number 5 kind of are connected, but number 3 here goes back to some feelings, because there's times, especially I'm learning with my daughter, I just don't understand. And so can you help me understand what you're feeling? What are you feeling? Help me understand. Like she's quiet. She doesn't want to talk. And, we're in the car and like there's something going on. I know there's something going on, whether it's brothers, something happened at school or gymnastics, whatever. And so extending that conversation, can you help me understand what you're feeling? What do you think of that question?
Yeah, I think I've asked that recently to my 4-year-old daughter a couple times. I'll ask it 3 or 4 times because I'm trying to really understand. And I think a good thing to say after some of these questions, probably all these questions, is a technique I learned in like a class in counseling of, hey, so what I hear you saying is this. Yeah. And, sometimes my daughter will, she'll share something that's just going on, and I'll say, okay, so what I hear you saying is this is how you feel about this. And she'll, no, that's not how. Okay, can you help me understand how you're feeling? Repeat that question. And if they get frustrated, that's fine, but teach them like, hey, no, this is part of the process of communicating so we understand. And then once you hit it and they know that, hey, you've taken the time to understand how I'm really feeling, what's going on, I think that means a lot to our kids. And I think it makes next time you have that conversation a little bit easier because they're like, okay, mom and dad, or they're going to try to actually hear me out and listen. And again, especially for teenagers, when I'm talking with teenagers, they just want to know that they're understood, that people are listening to them, and that they're felt deeply. So it is another good question,
and especially that feelings part, because there's times where I don't get it as a dad. I'm like, why, my wife Jen, like, you got to help me here. I don't get what's happening, but it forces me to slow down. It's like, okay, sweetie, help me understand what you're feeling, and like you said, those follow-up questions of like, so is this what you're feeling? And if it is, then we can talk about those things. So if it's not, then she can correct me.
Sure.
That's a tough one, but it's a good one. So that's number 3. Number 4, this one, your kids may be annoyed with you, but you can't. So just to kind of preface this. You can't do this with an angry tone or an irritated tone or a tone of like, I don't really care what you have to say, but I need you to say it again. So this question is, could you repeat that? Because I catch myself sometimes in the middle of an argument or like just some anger or tension, and can you repeat what say that again? What? And so that's not what.
And then they don't want to say anything.
And then they're like, oh gosh, I said something bad. But when there's something that's said that is a spark, or something that's said in the conversation with your kids, an easy win of like, hey, hold on. I just want to catch that again. Repeat that for me. Because that was like maybe something profound or something insight that they're learning, something at school. Like, hey, I was talking with my friend and he said this, but I think whatever the scenario is, like, well, hold on, repeat that. Can you repeat that? Because it allows them, it speaks to us like, I'm listening to you. I hear what you're saying. But then it's like, wait, that's a big deal. Like, why is that a big deal? And it helps them kind of see that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes our kids, they're just spouting off, right?
Yeah.
We do that too sometimes. I'm just talking off the cuff. I'm actually, you mentioned the emotions and how important they are. Sometimes our emotions are just taking over and we're just talking. Yeah. And so I think sometimes to use that question, hey, can you repeat what you just said? If they're obviously if they're talking kind of disrespectfully, and you can kind of use that as kind of a, hey, can you repeat what you just said? And then it makes them think like, did I really mean that? It gives you a chance to kind of like, hey, graciously parent in that situation. But then also, using if you literally just didn't hear what they said.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's just a good way to go, hey, can you repeat that? Because sometimes I think our kids can pick up, well, they're just not really listening. They don't really care what I just said. But when you say, hey, can you repeat that? they go, oh, okay, wow, they're actually making an effort here. And that's important.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good way to, you can use it multiple ways.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
It's a good question. And repeat that. Like the one I've used recently is my oldest popped off to my wife and it's like, hey, buddy, can you repeat that?
Mm-hmm.
And I was calm, but he said something he shouldn't have said.
Mm-hmm.
And I followed up with, you don't talk to my wife that way, you know? Like, you just want to make sure you repeat what you said and then never say it again.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's times where you have to do that. That's more correcting than connecting, but this is a good question.
Yep.
All right, number 5. This goes back to number 3, but it's just a blanket. So number 3 is, can you help me understand what you're feeling? This one is, man, again, if
just general.
It's general.
Less of a question, more of a statement.
Yeah. Hey, help me understand what's going on. Like there's a situation in class where so-and-so cheated on this thing and then the teacher's mad and then the other teacher's coming in, the principal. There's a lot of confusing, a lot of elements, a lot of moving parts. This is a question, instead of just going, all right, cool, like moving on, extend the conversation. All right, hold on.
Right.
Help me understand what's going on with all of this.
Right.
I think this is a more general, but it's a powerful one to really slow down and be like, man.
Yeah, because, parents that are listening to this, I hope, do a little experiment next time your kid starts telling you something. Watch how quickly your mind goes to just assumptions.
Yeah.
How quickly your mind starts to fill in gaps that may not even be there. If your kid tells you something like, I hate school, for example, and your mind goes to, well, the teachers are bad, my kid just doesn't like school, can't focus, all these things. Well, when you say, help me understand, your kid goes, well, I just had to fight with my best friend.
Yeah.
I mean, now you were way over here in left field, and now your child is telling you, I'm over here.
You're ready to attack the system.
Right.
But it was really,
exactly.
They don't want to go because friends and their embarrassment, and it has nothing to do with the system. So help me understand.
Help me understand.
Clarifies what's actually going on.
Right, and it allows them, honestly, what we're going for is more relationship, more communication. Yeah. And so don't just let the first thing they say be the end-all, be-all. Dissect it.
Yeah.
Get around the whole situation. Get your arms around the whole situation so you can have a good conversation and help them.
And you said we jump to assumptions. There's time where we know, like, so-and-so's having an issue with a friend and there's a friend group problem. Well, we know some stuff that's going on with the parents, and so we can interject our mind, but that's not the place.
Right.
The place is to help me understand what you're seeing,
right.
Not telling you, well, there's a reason because this is going on that I know that you don't want
to add more drama to the whole thing.
Don't add more drama.
Right.
But see what they're picking up, because what's crazy is they're picking up more than you would think. They're probably picking up some of the things that are going on that you already know.
And they're seeing stuff that we don't even see, which could actually be helpful, again, depending on the age of your kid.
Exactly.
So
help me understand. That's one of my favorite questions. I use it all the time with my kids. And again, before we go to the last two, these questions are meant to be in your toolbox, but like you can't use them all at the same time. So if you're going through or if you're listening going, all right, how'd that make you feel? What do you think of that? Can you help me understand what you're feeling? Can you repeat that? Like, that's not all in one conversation to extend it.
Exactly.
But just having this in the back of your mind of going, I should extend this conversation. Here's some questions that I can put in my pocket to do.
And don't rush the conversation. It's okay to be quiet for a minute and let things sit and think, pray. It's fine.
And there is times, like I will say, if my 4-year-old, if I'm doing laundry or dishes, like I got to finish my task. And there's times where I need to say, hey, as soon as I'm done with this, you got all my attention.
Exactly.
Let me finish what I'm doing here. And then so that's okay too. Like there's no guilt or shame with however you're communicating with your, just being intentional. So number 6. All right, so we got 1 through 5. Number 6. This one I really like. The last 2 I really like, but this one I like a lot. Number 6 is, what do you think we should do about it?
I feel like this is the coaching question.
Yeah.
Of all these, this is like the coaching question. And we talk, hear a lot about the stages, of parenting, caregiver when they're young, and being a cop, when they're in that kind of like adolescence age. And then you've got the junior high years where they're, you're kind of becoming a consultant a little bit, or coach, if you will. And then as they graduate into college and they move on, they're your consultant. To me, this is if your kid's in junior high or high school, this is the question you should be asking a lot, is what do you think, we should do about that? Or what do you think you should do about that? Or what do you think they should have done in that situation? Because that's a good real life role play kind of question to make your kid think, oh yeah, here's what I would have done in that situation. And then again, you can have follow-up questions and conversations based on that. But it is a good...
Yeah, and you have to, whatever the question is, or whatever the answer is, even though you know the answer and you know what that you want them to do, this may be a good time for you to just practice some freedom, practice some independence with them, of saying, this is what you think you should do, with safe guardrails, obviously.
Sure.
If it's something that fits, it may not be exactly the way you want, but let them try like the solution. If they come to you with the problem, you're asking, hey, what do you think you should do about this? And then they give you a solution. It may not be exactly your solution, but let them see this problem solving technique that a lot of kids don't have, because their parents just take care of everything. Our kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. And so this question, it gives you insight into who they are, what's going on really internally, and then it gives them opportunity for growth.
We're not raising kids.
No,
we're raising, hopefully, God-honoring adults that will love the Lord. And so anything we can do to cultivate that, when you plant a garden, you're putting the seeds down, and you're watering them, and you're getting them sunlight, and you're weeding out stuff. It's like you're not growing seeds, you're growing the fruits and the vegetables and what you want to do. So this question, I feel like, really does help prepare kids for, okay, if I'm in that situation again, I've thought about this. What do you think we should do about this? Whatever the situation could be. So it's good.
It's good. It's just good parenting, but it's good stewardship of them growing into themselves, letting them kind of face some pressure in some situations on their own, that we don't have to rescue them for everything. And that's a good question. And so really there's 6 questions for extending the conversation. Number 7 is just like a bonus, because it's kind of just fun. This has helped me. I've used this quite a bit with my kids the last few weeks, but number 7 is silly. Like, it's not practical. Like, even asking this question with my kids, are like, what are you up to? Like, why are you asking this question this way? So preface all that to say, all right, so question number 7 is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this to you? And so my oldest, he's on the Switch and he's playing video games, and like, he's telling me, Dad, if we do this with this, blah, 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 and he goes on this whole thing, and I can't keep up. And I was like, bro, I'm at a loss. I wanted the conversation to end. I didn't want to extend it. I was like, you're out of my league. But I was like, all right, scale of 1 to 10, just give me some feedback. How important is this to you? And he was like, it's like a 7, Dad. Like, this is really a big deal. I'm like, for his mind, okay, 7's a big deal. So I told him, I was like, really, that high? Okay, if it's important to you, then tell me, help me understand.
Help me back to the other questions.
I'm going to the other questions, because I was like, if you're saying it's a 7, and I go, shut up, stop talking.
No.
I just crushed you.
Not going to be good.
It's not. And so my hope is, when there's bigger stuff, maybe girls, or maybe whatever, or emotions, or things that go on, a scale of 1 to 10, if he comes to me with a 7, he's going to know, okay, Dad's going to stop what he's doing and give some time. And so that's it's a silly question, but I think it's a fun one that you can add into your kind of repertoire, if you will. But
I bet it's a question that if you ask constantly, like you said, your kids get used to it, and then when things get dicier and more serious, it allows your kid just to articulate another way of what's going on inside of them, how important things really are, for them to think through what they're really thinking, and just to know, like you just said, hey, if I say this is important, my dad's going to take time. Even if it's not important, you can have a fun laugh about it. If you already know it's important to your kid, don't ask that question, I'd say. But like, perfect use of what you just did. So if they love Dude Perfect and that's all their life is about, and they want to
talk about Dude Perfect. Don't ask this question. You know it's going to be
well, and you can even flip it. I would say, even as a parent,
Yeah.
you're talking to your kids and you notice they're not listening to you, and you say, "Hey, son, daughter, this is a 9 to me.
Yeah.
This is importance of 9. They'll know
That's
what you're
good.
talking about.
That's real good.
And
Yeah.
I think that'll kind of like something maybe click in their mind, like, oh,
Yeah.
this is important to Dad. I better listen here.
Yeah.
So
good.
but don't
man.
overplay that one.
Yeah, don't overdo it. Well, man, thank you, Joe, for just your
Yeah, dude.
insight and time. But we talk a lot about conversations, having conversation, meaningful conversations. There's a ton of great resources. If you just go to kingsland.org/conversations, we put together a big collection full of Kingsland.org, empoweredhomes.org/conversations. There's a big collection of resources. There's a conversation kit, after school conversation starters. There's a ton of stuff. But as the school was starting, I was just thinking, I had several conversations with the parents, like, what do I do if my kid won't talk? And so I did some research, found these questions, and I hope they're helpful. I hope that you can hear in us that, yes, we're going to correct our kids, but man, may we be parents who are overly connecting through conversation and letting our kids know that they can come to mom and dad for anything. So
Absolutely.
if you have questions for us, if you want to ask us questions for the next podcast, you can email us at podcast@empoweredhomes.org, or you can make a comment on YouTube or anywhere here. But if you want more information or more great resources on marriage, parenting, and personal growth, you can find incredible stuff at empoweredhomes.org. Thanks, Joe.
No problem, bro.